So hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I did start filming this in another location today and I put up some of the footage now, but as you could probably see, even though it was a fascinating location with the dilapidated church, it was extremely noisy on a busy A road. So hopefully this is a little bit more peaceful for me to do this video here today. Obviously, I've been shooting Fujifilm now for a little while, and whilst I've been relatively happy with the 15-45 XC lens and the 35mm f1.4, I wanted to get a more general zoom walkabout lens that would cover a lot of my scenarios, be a little bit easier to use than the 15-45, as well as having slightly better image quality, and one specifically as well that was weatherproof, so I could take it out, or I say weatherproof, weather resistant, so I could take it out in all scenarios and not let a little bit of rain spoil the day. So that got me on to thinking about the 18-135 quite naturally, really, because even though it's not quite as wide as my 15-45, it does have a good general range of between about 27 and 207 millimeters full frame equivalent. So for a time I thought that that was going to be the lens that I would get, but I was a little bit put off with the 18-135 as well as the 16-80 lens, because sample variation seems to be quite high when I was doing some research, and that put me off both of those lenses. Then I looked at also as well the Sigma 18-50, but because I've already got the 15-45, the 18-50 just seemed a little bit limiting. I wanted a lens that would be more wide-ranging, I guess. So I discounted, even though the 18-50 as well on the Sigma was quite appealing because of that constant f2.8 aperture, and it's certainly one I may consider in the future. I also discounted the 16-55 Fuji lens as well, so I didn't have to catch my bag. I did try to use this to shield the Osmo from a bit of rain, but the gimbal protection thing initiated, so I had to remove it. So if I just talk fast, then hopefully I can get this video done and dusted before rain stops play. So yeah, I discounted the 16-55 because for me, I just thought that it was a bit too big and heavy for me at this juncture. So what need does that leave me with to fulfill for my Fuji systems? And that's something with a bit more reach at the tele end to give me more range. And ideally as well, something a little bit stabilized to pair with my unstabilized XC1. So I looked at the 55-200 and the 70-300mm lenses, but ultimately I decided to go for the cheap and cheerful Fujifilm XC 50-230, which I've got attached to my XC1 here. So this gives a range of about 70 all the way up to about 350mm full frame equivalent. So I managed to get a really good deal here in the UK from a bricks and mortar store as well. So it did come with some warranty. Weight was also a factor as well, because I'm happy with the XC1. That's why I discounted the 16-55, because it would have almost overbalanced the XC1. So this 50-230 only weighs about 375 grams. And yeah, it does feel really good on the XC1 body, despite it tromboning quite a bit at the tele end. The only downside to this lens initially was that obviously it's quite a slow lens. I think the maximum widest aperture is 4.5 and that goes up to 6.7, so it's certainly not something I'm going to be using a lot of in low light, although that became a little bit more of a problem down the line when I started trying to shoot images of my puppy coming towards me in woodlands and other low light type scenarios. But for the price, there wasn't really a lot to grumble at. And it's only one stop worse than the 55-200 lens that Fuji produced, and that one weighs about 580 grams, so it would have been a bit of a bigger proposition than this lens here, and again cost had to be a factor. That lens I think here in the UK used is about £400, almost double what I paid for the 50-230. It also as well doesn't have a dedicated aperture ring, so you have to use the rear dial on cameras to control the aperture, and it's something I've been used to doing anyway on the 15-45. And yeah, so that wasn't really a big concern for me, even though I do like the aperture ring on the 35mm f1.4. So let's talk about my first impressions now. When I got the lens and I took it out and used it on both the XH1 that I had at the time as well as the XE1. What did I think about it? So it's easy to use, no fuss. As you can see, there's not really a lot to it, just a zoom ring really, and I haven't really used the manual focus ring either, just relying on autofocus that the camera body will deliver. Yeah, so the build quality of this lens actually quite surprised me. Yes, it's a plastic lens pretty much, but the zoom range is nice and smooth, and it just feels quite well manufactured and solid. There's no real kind of shake, you know, it just all feels quite tight. And yeah, so I was really quite pleased actually with the build quality of the lens. Probably a little bit of a downside is I do find the focusing, certainly when you're approaching its minimum focus distance, can be a little bit hit or miss, and that's something I really struggled with when I was shooting my puppy running towards me, because the minimum focus distance of this lens is pretty disappointing. It's a massive 1.1 meters, so that's quite a big distance, quite limiting depending on what subjects you're shooting. Obviously, if you can move away from your subject, it's fine, but if your subject is coming towards you, then obviously as soon as it gets to that point, then the camera is just not going to be able to focus. Yeah, so compared to the 55-200, this one does go up to 230, so it is nice to have that extra reach for certain subjects. It does deliver some really good, pleasing images. Yes, it does suffer from a little bit of purple fringes in high contrast situations, but that is easy to remove in post. And as expected, with a widest aperture of f4.5, its performance in low light is, as expected, not great. Right, so moving on to some more longer term thoughts. I've had the lens now for about 10 months, and even though it's on the XE1 here, I have used it on my XH1 to capture some action shots of my puppy. But as I mentioned in the video when I took a look at the XH1, I didn't really find that combination worked that well, and I tended to prefer the results that I could achieve with my Olympus cameras and lenses. It was probably a little bit of an unfair comparison because I was using the 12-40 Pro lens, and I suspect better glass would have helped to produce better images, more comparable to those that I shot on the Micro Four Thirds system. But I just wasn't overly impressed with the performance of the XH1 body itself. However, I still think it's probably worth me hanging on to this lens. It's a good lightweight compact lens for this setup with the XE1. So this is going to be a relatively short video for me, because that's all I have really to say at the moment on this particular lens. Not a massive exciting review, but there it is. It's done quite well for me when I've used it on the XE1 and on the XH1 when I haven't been capturing kind of action shots, when I've used it more for opportunist street or landscape type photography. Then generally, as long as you stay away from the far end of its reach, the image quality is very acceptable. So I'll leave you in this video with a montage of the favorite shots that I've captured with this lens in the 10 months or so that I've had it now. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye for now.